Hello and welcome back to Pro Tour Rivals Ixalan. I'm Tim Willoughby, this is Simon Gertzen, and you know what? Draft's out of the way, at least for today, and that means we get a chance to sink our teeth into one of the deepest formats in the whole of Magic. We're talking about Modern, and our feature match area is full of great players with so many different decks. I'm genuinely really looking forward today and tomorrow, Simon, to seeing the vast breadth of different options that people can bring to this Modern format. We have, in our feature match area, we've got two Hall of Famers that we're going to be kicking things off with, and they have both chosen to go right at the very control end of the spectrum. We're going to get a chance to see Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa up against Raphael Levy, both playing control in our feature match area. Let's head and see round 4 here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. Hello and welcome to this round 4 of Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. I'm Tim Willoughby, Simon Gertzen with me, and we have a heavyweight matchup in our feature match area to kick things off with here. We have two players, both in the Hall of Fame, both bringing their own take on how control works in this modern format. First up, we have, there we see them both, we have Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. He's won Pro Tours across a whole variety of formats, and here he has come along with Jeskai control. So he's got red, white, and blue working for him. Meanwhile, flying the flag of red, white, and blue from France, we have Raphael Levy. He's just on straightforward blue-white control, and I'm really interested to see, Simon, how these two decks interact. I'm confident that this game is going to go long and that we're going to see a lot of turns, but the differences between these two decks almost as important as the similarities.
Yes, of course they are very similar. In the end, Jeskai control is just blue-white control splashing red for removal spells. But these removal spells are actually not what you want in a control matchup. So I think the player with lightning bolts and electrolyzes should be at a disadvantage here.
Yeah, there's a few kind of key cards that we're going to see. Ancestral Vision is in Raphael Levy's deck, but is not available to Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. So in terms of pure card advantage, he may be a little ahead. Also, both of these decks leaning on Celestial Colonnade to get damage through, and while Raphael Levy has a full 4 copies of Field of Ruin, the same cannot be said for Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. It'll be interesting to see how these later turns play out, given these subtle differences.
Yeah, and Raphael Levy can afford to play Spreading Seas in his 2-color deck, whereas usually the Jeskai control decks don't find space for that card.
Spreading Seas, on the face of things, turning lands into islands against a blue deck doesn't sound that potent, but actually some of the multicolored lands are super powerful in this matchup. There we see the first spell of the game from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa, Search for Azcanta, coming down. That one will give him a lot of card selection and potentially even card advantage as we hit the mid and late game.
Yeah, I think that Search for Azcanta is one of the absolute key cards for this matchup. It's one of the key cards for blue control decks in Modern. It might be the reason why blue control decks are popular in Modern right now. Ancestral Visions will give Levy 3 cards if it's not countered, but the advantage of Search for Azcanta and later the backside actually is even greater than that.
Yeah, Field of Ruin already in play for Raphael Levy, so he has the potential to deal with Azcanta as and when it transforms. But in the meantime, there'll still be that scrying from Paulo, and if he wants, he can just choose to not allow it to transform and continue to just get card selection rather than actual card advantage.
Yeah. It's actually a May ability, so you can just continue to filter your draws.
We can see there Levy, a little bit of air in his hand here, plays a Vendilion Clique. We'll see whether or not he wants to target himself to improve his draws or see what Paulo's got going on here. And Electrolyze with the ability on the stack means that the 3/1 legendary creature getting killed off, drawing a card for Paulo, and now he reveals everything that's happening in there. Path to Exile in hand, probably not that useful against control, but Serum Visions, Snapcaster Mage, all these cards useful to know about. And I guess that Raphael Levy has the option here, if he's not too afraid of those cards, of leaving them all there rather than risking Paulo getting something better.
That's true. On the other hand, you're not really scared of individual cards in this matchup. You know that things will go long and that it's going to be a grind. So a card like Snapcaster Mage is actually problematic in a sense, because it's just 2 cards, basically.
And it looks like Raphael Levy elects to put that one on the bottom. So Paulo will get to draw a card to replace it.
Especially in game 1, when you're playing a control, mirror, you know that both players have a lot of dead cards in their decks. So I think replacing a strong card with a random card is overall a strong play.
Detention Sphere there, taking out the Search for Azcanta before it can do too much. Detention Sphere often thought about as mainly a way of dealing with creatures, but it can do with any non-land permanent, and there Raphael Levy keen to make sure that Search for Azcanta does not turn into a land at any point later on.
Yeah, and you can already tell what the real big threats are in this matchup. It's not the creatures, because especially in game one, both players have so many ways of dealing with creatures. It's the enchantments, and it's going to be the planeswalkers, and at some point it's going to be celestial colonnades.
So this is the first real fight that we have with any counter magic going on. Ancestral Vision coming off Suspend, Cryptic Command in response from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa, and a Logic Knot from Raphael Levy, enough to make sure that his big card drawing spell resolves. So a few additional cards here for Raphael Levy. We'll see whether or not he's going to be able to leverage them. This is not the kind of matchup where I anticipate someone winning out of nowhere. In fact, we've already had our first win in our feature match area, Adriano Moscato picking up his first game win with Affinity on one of our back tables. Jarvis Yu with his Affinity deck also picking up game one very, very quickly. That's not how I would characterize this matchup. We're going to be here for a little while, and it'll be a gradual eking out of advantage.
Well, it's pretty obvious that this might be the slowest matchup in the feature match area. I don't know if anybody's playing Lantern Control, but here you can just see that things will be relatively slow. I want to get back to the point where Paulo decided to Cryptic Command the Ancestral Vision, and that looks like he was just playing into a counterspell, but because Cryptic Command is quite expensive at 4 mana, and he didn't have anything better to do, I liked this decision. It forced Raph to have something, and in the end, you can't expect much more than to trade your Cryptic Commands for other counter magic, cheaper counter magic.
Opt being drawn off the top there for Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. Another instant speed way of just filtering draws, improving card drawing, because ultimately this is a deck full of answers and you want to be drawing the right answers for the situation. And there are so many decks in Modern that are so specialized that it means that on occasion you do find yourself with the wrong answers in hand at any given moment. Another copy of Spreading Seas in hand for Raphael Levy alongside these Fields of Ruin. I think that we're likely to see at some point here a bit of a battle over lands in play, which makes a lot of sense when you think about Control. Often what they're looking to do on their own turns is play a land, pass the turn, and wait to see what the other opponent's got going on. With this second Spreading Seas, we may see Paulo Vitor still cut off white mana.
My read here is, Tim, that Paulo really wanted to be good against aggro decks, which, with what we know about the metagame, is a really good call. But running into Raphael Levy, a Hall of Famer on blue-white Control, it's one of the worst matchups that he can be facing because of the difficulties of using a card like Lightning Helix profitably.
So that was a Lightning Helix in response to Spreading Seas in order to be able to use that white mana while it was still available.
This like, yeah, I guess that doesn't work. Sure, yeah. So I've seen my first card down. Probably gonna fetch, so I don't know why.
Judge call here, I think, with the related to the Spreading Seas trigger.
And I drew, but I was not supposed to draw.
Okay, but
I've seen the card. Like I was.
But at the same time, when
like
when you play the card,
yeah.
you went to draw your card, right?
That's what I wanted, and then he said white, and I don't remember exactly.
He played this,
Yes.
and then he was going to draw his card, and I tapped, and I said
Oh yeah,
white.
okay. So actually,
Yes.
And then he said
my trigger
attack
might
stab.
actually still be there.
So I helixed him.
So I was about to draw. He said white. I said, oh okay, well. Basically, he stopped my draw step by saying like I take a white. Then I kind of waited for him to do something with white.
Okay.
So yeah, sure.
So,
Just a little complexity there about the exact timings of floating mana in response to Spreading Seas, and obviously you don't draw the card for the Spreading Seas until the Spreading Seas itself resolves.
okay, so I didn't see you doing the motion to draw when that happened, so I don't think you missed the trigger.
Okay.
So my ruling would be that you get to draw the card.
But he
You
said
can-
attack.
I understand, but he went to draw the card right away, and he stopped because you said white.
But then once I said white, he said attack.
I understand that. I don't believe he missed the trigger. You can appeal that. I saw him moving the hand to grab the card, and then he stopped when you said white.
Yes.
So
and
he
then
didn't miss
stopped.
the trigger. He was going to draw the card
so
right
the
away.
trigger was still in the stack. That's what
He was
says.
doing he doesn't have to say trigger as long as he's doing the physical action, and he went to draw the card.
But then he went to combat before drawing the card.
I understand that after that happened, he decided attack instead of just drawing the card. But from the start when he played the card, he basically said, I'm going to draw the card by going to draw it.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, so play resuming here. Raphael Levy drawing his card from Spreading Seas. Looks like there was just a communication issue there that we just needed to get cleared up. Drew a Ruined Halo. This is kind of an interesting one in this matchup because I guess that there are lots of ways of getting one-for-one trades on cards here, but Ruined Halo can name a card and then every copy of it in Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa's deck will be neutralized.
Yeah, and the biggest threat in the deck is probably still Celestial Colonnoid, even though you have so many answers to it, because you are not really so concerned about Snapcaster Mage beating you down, and I can't really see naming something like Lightning Helix. That just wouldn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, Raphael Levy on 15 life. It's going to take a lot of burn spells to take him even close to being killed off that way.
It is a path to victory, though. If you draw these burn spells anyway, you do have to do something with them, and especially 3 damage burn spells are not particularly good at dealing with Celestial Colonnades. So that's just 5 more burn spells, and of course I'm counting Snapcaster flashbacks to potentially win the game.
Yeah, I guess that one of the advantages of the Jeskai build of Control is that there's at least the potential to go in that route if other options are being dealt with.
And if you remember some of the epic Jeskai Control matchups, sometimes it's all about mana and card advantage, but then in the end there's a flurry of burn spells and Snapcaster Mages to close it out. So Raph does have to win at some point because Paulo does have a victory condition which does not rely on lands or creatures.
Yeah, and there's I guess the potential on either side here of running the opponent out of win conditions. Typically with control decks, you run far more answers than you do ways of actually winning the game. You just have to hope that your win conditions are tenacious enough to get there.
I like the one Secure the Wastes in PV's deck, so he does have another way of surprising the opponent with creatures. On the other hand,
that can just end the game almost in one fell swoop.
Exactly, and on the other hand, Rav is playing 2 Gideon's ally of Zendikar, so that's a potential win condition. There are a few ways to actually close out the game.
Conveniently, of course, with these modern card pools, there is such a bevy of options when it comes to building a control deck that there is a little bit of room to surprise your opponent. Each of these players have picked slightly different ways of winning the game on top of the Celestial Colonnades, which were also just fixing their mana anyway.
So PV freed his Search for Azcanta with Cryptic Commander. Now we have a really interesting spot for 2 reasons. First of all, he gets to decide if he wants to keep Lightning Bolt on top of his deck, which he does. So that shows us, gives us already some information about how he thinks this game will develop. He values Lightning Bolt as a card that he wants to draw. Also, he now has Azcanta in play, but of course there is Field of Ruins to take care of it, but not before an activation.
So this Azcanta, yes, Paulo knew that it was going to get hit by a Field of Ruin at some point, but this way round he at least gets the 1 card draw off it. Finds himself an Electrolyze with the mana to cast it. And I guess that with Field of Ruin being another feature, Paulo might have to think relatively carefully about what he does with his fetch lands, how many basics he has left in his deck. And doesn't want to be in a position where at some point that Field of Ruin turns into closer to being a strip mine.
And I think we are already there because he's playing 3 islands and a single plains. Based on his deck list. So the rest are actually fetch lands and dual lands. 4 basics, of course, a lot if you want to play around Blood Moon or be safe from Ghost Quarter. But of course, in such a drawn out matchup, you can run out of basics. For comparison, Levy has 9 basics in his deck because he's 2-colored. His mana base is, of course, a lot easier.
So along comes a Runed Halo here. We'll see whether or not there's any kind of a fight from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa on this one. Runed Halo, a really interesting one. I guess it's kind of a nice catch-all answer that you can play against all manner of different decks, and there are some matchups. I mean, against Storm, for example, if you name Grape Shot, then your opponent's really just going to have to get that off the board before they can do anything.
And in game one, that might be impossible depending on the deck list. Yeah, I don't love it in this matchup. I do, however, like the idea of PV burning out Levy, just winning with burn spells alone, and that's exactly the game plan he's crafting. So because this is apparent, Levy should probably name a burn spell now.
And he's elected to go for Lightning Helix. He just double-checked the graveyard there, and I presume that was him getting a count on how many of different various burn spells he'd seen. Obviously, if there was one that he suspected there were more copies of left in the deck, that would be the straightforward one to name. Though I guess with Snapcaster Mage, even those calculations can get a little bit tricky. Lightning Bolt off the top for Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. Immediately, Raph Levy's life total going down to single digits there. Lots of lands in play is kind of where you normally want to be with control as this second Runed Halo comes down for Raphael Levy. This is all the copies of Runed Halo left in his deck, but between the two of them, they will make it a little bit fiddly for Paulo if he's going on the burn plan.
Absolutely, and PV does not have access to Detention Sphere, which would, of course, be an incredible answer to both of these Runed Halos.
So, if we're now in a position where, and as it appears to be, a lot of the burn options from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa's deck are being locked out by Runed Halos, does that mean that PV has to completely switch plans, or is there potentially merit in playing a super long game looking to get Cryptic Command bouncing at least one of those Runed Halos?
Well, how else do you want to win? Do you want to rely on your Celestial Colonnades? I don't think that's a viable strategy, because Levy's amount of answers to your 3 Celestial Colonnades are just vastly outnumber your threats. You're still looking at, I believe, 2 more Field of Ruins and probably 2 more Spreading Seas. So that's 4 more answers. We haven't even talked about the 4-path tracks in Levy's deck. So no, I don't think you can win with Celestial Colonnade. So either you find a burn plan that works, or we're talking about finding that 1 copy of Secure the Waste.
So we see a gigantic Logic Knot here coming from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa in the hopes of keeping himself from getting locked out here. The interesting Future Sight counter spell that lets you delve in order to potentially stop even the opponents that have an awful lot of additional mana. But here, Snapcaster Mage means that Raphael Levy able to play a Logic Knot of his own. Graveyards on both sides getting depleted somewhat in the process from this one.
Yeah, and as is usual in these kind of control matchups, the person that's forced to react first is usually in the worst position, because Paulo had to Logic Knot for a higher amount and had to leave himself open to counter magic here.
So even though when we look at these life totals, we see Raphael Levy on 7, Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa on 16, by the sounds of it, it does not sound like the advantage is as firmly with Paulo as it might appear, at least from life totals.
No, in fact, I think the 2 Runed Halos resolving do put the advantage firmly in Raphael Levy's camp.
So plenty of counter magic on both sides still. That Snapcaster Mage in play for Raphael Levy, in principle, can get stuck in and maybe deal a little bit of damage here. Though each of these decks, as you so rightly noted, Simon, have lots of ways of dealing with creatures, so I can't imagine that Snapcaster Mage is going to be able to get through for the full 8 unimpeded swings. Back comes Search for Us counter.
Lightning Helix and Lightning Bolt being the 2 cards named with Runed Halo, so only Electrolyze left as a potential burn spell.
Path to exile there. I'm guessing that Levy with plenty of basics still to find. In fact, the planes on the bottom of his deck doing just fine there.
And this is interesting because you can see the lightning helix in Paulo's hand, and you might have thought that maybe you would want to lightning helix the Snapcaster Mage because you can't target the player anymore. But Paulo knows that he needs this lightning helix should he ever be able to cryptic command bounce the ruined halo, and that these 3 damage to Raphael Levy directly might be the difference between being able to win the game or not.
Now, is there anything to be considered in this kind of a control matchup for potentially one player running the other out of cards entirely?
It's possible, but it's not very likely. I think it's more likely that one player will run the other out of resources, and then we see something like a Snapcaster Mage or the Celestial Colonnades, which we've talked so much about, go the distance.
Quick updates from a couple of our games going on elsewhere in our feature match area. We have 2 games already heading into their game 3s, very vastly different speeds from these various decks. Colin Roundtree and Adriano Moscato, they're going to their game 3. Also, Jarvis Yu and Oliver 2 going to their game 3. Meanwhile, Pierre Dajon, also on blue-white control, is up 1 game against Sean McLaren. And here comes a big threat, potentially one that there could be a fight over. Gideon ally of Zendikar coming down for Raphael Levy.
That's a huge threat for PV. Not only does it put pressure on him, but also the emblem is very problematic for his burn plan.
So it looks like we are seeing some responses here from Paulo.
Well, Paulo can also play it cool and say, look, the card I want to deal... the card I want to use to deal with Gideon is actually Path to Exile. I have it in my hand. So I'll wait for you to activate it and let it become a 5/5. But what if Ref actually doesn't do that?
Yeah, interesting mind games literally just with this Planeswalker if it makes it into play. In the meantime, it does appear that Paulo is setting up for another Logic Knot. Very versatile counterspell, though. At some point, are there key cards that Paulo is going to want to keep in his graveyard for Snapcaster Mage purposes?
Yes, absolutely. He wants at least 1 cryptic command there, but in the end, the graveyard should be big enough that it's not that he will always be able to keep, 1 or 2 key cards.
Yes,
He knows he has a Lightning Helix in hand, so if he ever gets to cast Lightning Helix, then it doesn't really matter if he has additional burn in the graveyard or not.
Just the 3 remaining cards in the graveyard after a big Logic Knot coming from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. And let's see what we've got Raph Levy working with in his hand here, whether or not we're going to see a fight. It looks like we've reached a point in the game where Raphael Levy's control deck has drawn all of its answers to someone else's deck.
To non-existent threats, yeah, phantom threats, so to speak. This is the point I wanted to make early on when we saw the Mendelian click decision. Snapcaster Mage is a super impactful, powerful card. Path to Exile, Condemn, Supreme Verdict, those cards are not what you are looking for in this matchup. So the average draw varies widely in being super powerful, like the Gideon, or being almost dead, like Supreme Verdict.
Yeah, I mean, Supreme Verdict at the absolute worst because so many of Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa's creatures are actually Celestial Colonnades that are not creatures at a moment where the big sorcery would be able to deal with them.
Yeah. Or they have flash in the form of Snapcaster Mage or Torrential Gear Hulk.
Speaking of Snapcaster Mage, ask, and he does show up, Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa drawing the powerful instant originally printed in Innistrad.
This is the first Celestial Colonnade we've seen all game.
And Paulo's the one who, in principle, is more open to getting hit by it, though we have seen that he's got plenty of removal to work with. He's not necessarily going to mind throwing some of it at a colonnade when there are so few other targets. And Levy carefully figuring out which lands to tap. The most straightforward element of that being tap your basics first because they only tap for 1 color of mana compared to all of those various hallowed fountains, etc., working for the Frenchman. And 5 mana being spent by Levy, 1 mana being spent on that Path to Exile. Looks like in response, Raph is going to tap the Celestial Colonnade for some mana there.
That's a really nice play. I have to say, I didn't see that before. Put target attacking creature on the bottom of its owner's library. Just not only saving Celestial Colonnade so he can draw it again, increasing his deck size by 1, and gaining 4 life.
All of these are things that Raphael Levy absolutely wants to be doing. Gaining the 4 life, there are plenty of matchups where that would be trivial. Right here, though, going from 7 to 11 a big deal, and following it up with another suspended Ancestral Vision, this could be big.
Really, really high-level play by both of these players here.
Quick update for you, Adriano Moscato did pick up his Game 3 Affinity, taking down Colin Roundtree. Roundtree had been our feature match area since round 1, but it will be Moscato that is going to be heading back there next round, having picked up that win. Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa's hand, in principle here, full of great cards. I mean, he's drawn Logic Knot after Logic Knot. Yes, his graveyard is not gigantic, but it's not going to take too long for him to fill it, especially with that Search for Azcanta in play. And with Logic Knots to spare, he can hopefully make sure that Ancestral Vision number 2 does not resolve, though there's an argument that you sometimes see in control matchups that you let the card drawing resolve because you know that you just need to stop the actual threats.
And if it should come down to decking as well.
Another Path to Exile to pick up for Raphael Levy there. He has to just draw and pass here. The one key thing that he's able to achieve for the turn, ticking down that Ancestral Vision, not even getting to play a land for the turn. And there's a Celestial Colonnade from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. At some point, he may be able to overload the one remaining Field of Ruin in play for Raph Levy here, with both the Colonnade and potentially Azcanta the Sunken Ruin going to be in play for him sometime very soon.
Yes, but the thing is, you can deal with Celestial Colonnade not only with Field of Ruin, but also with Path to Exile if you have to. So Raphael Levy is holding 3 of those, I believe, so that's a pretty easy card to cast.
Snapcaster Mage coming down here. This enough to have Raphael Levy checking out his opponent's graveyard.
The first time we are counting decks.
I mean, this is a classic control mirror right now. When you start thinking about where you are positioned in terms of decking, that's when you know that you've had a good old game. You got through every piece of the buffalo on this one, and with Ancestral Vision a turn off coming off suspend, it may be that Raphael Levy has made that count a little bit too late.
Well, he still has a choice who to target.
Oh, this is interesting.
Target player draws 3 cards. Don't expect it to happen, but it is a line. Both of these players will have a very good idea of what each other's deck is capable of regarding win conditions.
So Snapcaster Mage does get countered. Raphael Levy picking up a copy of Serum Visions in the process. Counter and draw. In this matchup, I think the most likely combination of modes that we might see, though there is certainly potential in the returning permanent to owner's hand, and that's certainly something that Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa especially may have on his mind, considering the number of troublesome enchantments in play from Raphael Levy. And another score update for you. It's been a good day in the feature match area thus far for Affinity. Jarvis Yu picking up his win 2-1 over Oliver 2. Both the Affinity players in our feature match area able to put things away in this first round of Modern here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan.
Okay, the first colonnade has been dealt with, Path to Exile. The second one came down for PV. He's playing 3 Celestial Colonnades only, so that's something to look out for. And Raphael did, in fact, target himself to draw some more cards. Wrath of God, just like Supreme Verdict, not the best card.
Yeah, Levy, in spite of having 6 cards in hand, which by default is kind of where the control player wants to be, lots of cards in hand, lots of lands in play, the amount of game-relevant cards in his hand is somewhat lower than that full 6. Meanwhile, Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa sat back on counter magic in a nice position to stop any of the key threats going on, and even with a Path to Exile there, so that if Celestial Colonnade does come down from Raphael Levy, he will have something to say about it. Serum Visions here. So Raphael Levy getting a chance to, having drawn a card, have a look at the top cards of his deck, and ultimately at some point he may want to do some shuffling, given that he did put a Celestial Colonnade on the bottom of his own library with that Condemn.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he has Flooded Strand just lying around. Maybe he doesn't want to reduce the size of his library. That might be a real concern. Although you could just fail to find if that's actually something you worry about.
So you get the shuffle, but you do not remove a card from your deck. It's a very narrow line of play, but it may prove relevant. The 1 point of life to activate the Flooded Strand at this point, with Levy on 11, doesn't seem quite so much a concern.
No, it isn't, and that's all because of this beautiful Condemn play that just did so many things at once.
You'll notice the time left on this round. This is still game one, and we're approaching 20 minutes left on the round. Weirdly, Modern kind of, it can be a bit bipolar in terms of the way that it plays out, length of games. You'll have some matchups that I'm sure have already been done for 10, 15 minutes. Meanwhile, our game one here has been an epic one and could easily go on for quite a little while longer.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that these players will not finish a second game, given how this game is shaping up to be. What we could also see is that one of these players at some point decides that the game is unwinnable based on the board states or the cards that are in graveyards, and then they will just concede basically out of the blue. But they have somehow figured out that they have no win conditions left and that they won't be able to deal with all the win conditions in the opponent's deck. I think a draw is more likely, but these things do happen in control matchups as well, especially if you think you have a good sideboard plan.
So for the second time in this first game, Field of Ruin dealing with Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, not before the Azcanta can draw Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa a single card. In this case, finding another copy of Cryptic Command, a fantastic pickup at this stage in the game when mana is very much at a surplus, whereas having a hard answer is certainly an attractive addition to an already pretty impressive looking hand.
Yeah. What I expect from this game going forward is that Paulo will try to deal with the threats he has to deal with, which is I think mostly Gideon, the second Gideon ally of Zendikar in Raph's deck, and then he needs some answer to Celestial Colonnade or a second Vendilion Click. But once he manages that, and preferably, of course, with cards like Path to Exile, then we will see a final turn, maybe just before decking actually, where PV will try to bounce one of the Halos, protect his Cryptic Command with more counter magic, and then try to go for a lethal combination of, for example, Lightning Bolt and Snapcaster Mage.
And I guess that we shouldn't forget the one white burn spell in his deck effectively. Secure the Wastes at end of turn to make a lot of creatures. Yes, there are Wrath of God and Supreme Verdict in Raphael Levy's deck, but if Paulo only needs one attack step, then they're not really going to do too much.
Yeah, mass removal like Supreme Verdict, sorcery speed mass removal is effectively irrelevant in this matchup. You might be able to kill something with it, but that means it probably already attacked you, which is not a good sign.
Another Field of Ruin being played by Raphael Levy here. Field of Ruin, a card that has come along relatively recently, but proven to be very important in this modern metagame. Another way of dealing with key non-basics that are being played by opponents, while at the same time making sure that you're able to fix your mana if absolutely need be also.
I'm going to move the advantage bar to PV side of the board because I don't really see Levy winning anymore. And that doesn't mean that PV is favored to win either, but I think he at least has a proactive game plan that that has a chance to get there. I don't see Raph collecting enough disruption and counter magic to ride something like a colonnade to victory. Okay, the players are counting the library once again, and of course this is crucial information. The player with less cards in their library is going to be forced to act or lose, and actually that's where the advantage bar should be. It should just be anti-proportional to the library size of both players.
Now, Torrential Gearhulk has been brought up on our card viewer, and there's a very good reason for that, because it's just been the card picked up by Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa in hand. Now, if Snapcaster Mage is good in Modern, then one must imagine that Torrential Gearhulk also a very potent threat. When you've got the likes of Cryptic Command in the graveyard already, it represents both something that can beat down fairly substantially and a way of getting a little bit more counter magic going on. Quick match update for you. This is now our last match going in the feature match area. It's still in game one. Pierre D'Argent with his blue-white control deck able to win it 2-0 against his opponent Sean McLaren. The French seem to like this blue-white control plan. I know that Levy and D'Argent, firm friends, they've been World Magic Cup teammates together, and they potentially have worked together on putting together this deck list.
Okay, Levy is counter drawing with Cryptic Command, which probably means that either he has no chance of winning the library race, or he's actually ahead and would not lose by decking before Paulo does.
Yeah, you can see some relatively slim decks at this point. Not too many cards left for either one of these players. It's always one of those things that when I asked the question earlier on about how likely it is to go to decking, it sounds ridiculous at that point in the game to be thinking about it, but I've seen it happen in Pro Tours before. It was something that we've seen Shota Yasuoka sitting down against a control player, and in the back of his mind, that's his primary win condition from surprisingly early in the game.
So now we actually have a bit of action here. Paulo knows that he doesn't have infinite time, and he wants to cast his spells when he has the most mana available. And that means from now on going for, let's say, one threat per turn. And that threat can just be Cryptic Command bouncing a Ruined Halo. Of course, it can also be Secure the Wastes, which Raph might not even expect.
Yeah, that one's certainly not a universal inclusion in any of these control decks, though if it is able to resolve, a very, very potent one given the number of lands in play at the moment for the Brazilian superstar. So here comes another Cryptic Command. A Snapcaster Mage coming from Levy. Paulo ultimately unimpressed by the Snapcaster Mage itself, happy to let that one resolve. He's more concerned with whatever it is the Snapcaster Mage allows to be flashed back from the graveyard here. And we may have dueling Cryptic Commands going on here. Plenty of mana available to both of these players, so we could potentially see a flurry of spells this turn.
Yeah, like he removed the last one.
This is the last one. Is the stem one?
Sorry?
It has been destroyed or removed from the list?
I mean, I assume I don't
This
know.
was destroyed with Field of Ruin, but did you exile it to
Logic?
No, the logic that
I
was.
have no idea.
It's like the judge is just trying to clear up something from a relatively complicated game that's gone on for quite a while here.
Well, in the meantime, I'll counter and bounce this guy.
You can see there that Raph Levy, he knew that he wanted to play the counter side of his Cryptic Command, had to think a little bit about whether or not he really wanted to draw yet another card, ultimately instead electing to bounce his Snapcaster Mage. And we're going to see still more responses from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa here.
But now we are we at the end of turn of PV?
So a Path to Exile does get rid of Snapcaster Mage. And that Cryptic Command, which was the one flashed back from Snapcaster Mage, on the stack at present. So I believe that Cryptic Command should be exiled, not still in Raphael Levy's graveyard, but Another ancestral vision to pick up there from Raphael Levy, and this, at this point, could be one of his paths to victory as he is looking to find a way of getting the right side of the clock in terms of players running out of cards.
Absolutely, and now Paulo definitely has less than 10 cards left, so time is running out for him, but he has found his trump card in Secure the Waste, and the big question is, how is Raph going to be able to deal with that over and over again? And I think PV has done a tremendous job of running Raph out of counter magic. He's just putting so much pressure on him, pretending that he can burn him out. Casting Cryptic Command, bouncing Runed Halo is not a winning play, but it's a scary play because you don't know if you might be just dead if that resolves.
Yeah, Raphael Levy on 11 life here has to have a little think about what he wants to do with Torrential Gearhulk coming down. The Gearhulk for 6 mana, a big monster that also brings a spell from the graveyard.
And Raph actually has been too scared to play aggressively with Celestial Colonnade. This is, I think, the key thing in this game. If you are not ready, not willing to invest these 5 mana during your turn, then Celestial Colonnade becomes kind of worthless because, well, they never attack.
So here we have Cryptic Command in response to Torrential Gearhulk. And Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa carefully checking out both the Exile Zone and the graveyard of Raphael Levy, trying to figure out how many more hard answers there might be left in Raphael Levy's deck here, because he is perilously close to being able to say, right, well, now I guess my spells must be able to resolve because you've already used all of your most potent counter magic.
Exactly, and Levy actually has less counter magic than PV. PV has 4 Cryptic Commands, but also the 4 full Logic Knots. So that's a bit more than 3 Cryptics, a Logic Knot, and a Negate.
Very careful accounting of exactly what's in play here from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. His mind must be absolutely whirring at this point to try and figure out what the remaining cards are, both in Raphael Levy's hand and indeed in his deck, that may shake him off being able to win this game 1 here. And essentially winning game 1 at this point is winning the match, because I honestly can't see either of these decks able to put together a win in the less than 10 minutes remaining in this round.
Absolutely not. PV not only has to consider all these options, but also he always has to have in the back of the mind if a certain exchange during a turn still allows him to cast Secure the Waste in a profitable manner. Because, of course, you would want to cast it for 11, but then it's just going to get countered by anything. So what you really want to do is you want to cast it and have Logic Knot mana available, but I don't think that PV can do that and still threaten lethal with a single spell.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because he's played so many Logic Knots here. The number of cards left in his graveyard, not very exciting. The number of cards left in his deck, also a relatively low single-digit number at this point. And that means that Logic Knot maybe not quite the hard counter that it sometimes is, especially when there's so much mana available to Raphael Levy to simply pay for it. Now, activating Field of Ruin here for Raphael Levy, one thing that it will do for him, over and above simply dealing with another land from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa, it'll let him have a look through the rest of his deck and help piece together a final game plan for the dying stages of this game.
Uses another Path to Exile here.
And does go for the Field of Ruin.
You can see nicely that PV actually has all 4 Cryptic Commands in his graveyard, or maybe in the graveyard and exile zone, I would assume. So he has just outdrawn Raph in the amount of hard counters. He's quite close to turning that into a victory, but he had to craft a game plan where in the end he's left with Secure the Waste and 1 hard counter more than Raph, basically.
I would love to have Brian David Marshall interviewing Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa at the end of this match to ask him sort of at what point he started to work on this game plan, because it feels to me like we're watching a trap that has been set up by Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa for turn after turn after turn in this game that potentially could have been going on for a very large proportion of this match.
I'm going to tell you exactly when he started working on that game plan. When he put secure the wastes in his deck. This is premeditated. This is not something you do by accident. You know that these games will go on forever, that you can't afford to play sideboard cards for the matchups because the game just goes too long. So secure the waste is the trump card that he's playing in the main deck. And despite being tacked against an aggro field, like we said, a very good choice, he's playing 8 hard counters, if you're counting logic, not as a hard counter, in his main deck to dominate these kind of matchups.
So we see Ruined Halo briefly being used to bounce. Ruined Halo briefly being bounced by Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa, and Gideon, ally of Zendikar, number 2, getting cast by Raphael Levy, desperate to find a way of closing out this game, though I'm not sure whether or not Gideon is going to be quick enough at this point, even if he can hang around, as the Planeswalker does resolve.
You have 5, right? I have
6.
6 to 5 in terms of cards left in deck, and Raphael Levy willing to make it 5 to 5 by casting Spreading Seas here. Raphael Levy has been pretty consistent that when he's been sending Spreading Seas at something, it has always been a land that taps for white mana here.
Sorry? Targeting this.
Yes.
Oh, and it's actually the last white source for PV.
And this could prove pretty relevant if it is in fact the case that there's no more white sources available for Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa, because even having done all of this work to get in the position of being able to cast a big Secure the Waste, that's not going to help him if he simply doesn't have the mana left in his deck to be able to achieve it.
So how much mana does he have available? This is kind of tricky now. Like I said, if you can't cast the Secure the Waste for 11, which I don't think he can, because those 3 lands at the bottom are actually fetch lands. Four, 7, 8, 9, 10. I see X equals 10 without counter backup.
So Lightning Helix going to Raphael Levy's head here.
There might, of course, be another white source in his deck that he just didn't fetch out to have protection from exactly this scenario.
How many layers deep has Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa gone on this plan? Ancestral Vision on suspend may be the deciding factor when it finally comes off the suspend. Whether or not it resolves or not could end this game pretty decisively.
Yeah, I only count 3. I only count those 4 untapped white sources that are all below a Spreading Seas, or actually above a Spreading Seas. So PV has to either find a colonnade that he gets to untap with, or he needs to bounce one of his lands, or, well, I guess bouncing a land is better than bouncing a Spreading Seas.
Yeah, this is a strange turn of events here that Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa, in spite of having put together a very intricate and sort of well-poised line of play, may find himself a little bit messed up just in terms of mana here.
Well, I think what we will see is just Snapcaster, Flashback Cryptic, and target one of my white lands. But that, of course, then PV is probably regretting letting that Gideon resolve.
So Rune Halo coming back down. Raph Levy, he can briefly have a little think about whether or not he wants to name something other than Lightning Helix. Now that white is not so much of a concern, it may be that he has some other option that he wants to go with.
Yeah, and if you're wondering, I believe that you have to name a card. You might be even required to name a modern card, but ultimately you won't be able to name something like a warrior token.
Yeah.
So even if you knew about Secure the Wastes, it wouldn't be a legal choice with Ruined Halo.
Now, there you see he actually names Lightning Bolt with the second Ruined Halo as along with the first, basically saying Lightning Bolt is the spell that you can actually cast. rather than setting up a situation where a cryptic command could potentially leave him open to being hit with a lightning bolt, Levy simply playing a second Rune Halo on the same card just to give him a little bit of insurance there.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if I like that, because if PV is not going to find a white source, I think you're winning anyway. What a tight game. It comes down to the final cards, basically.
Yeah, 4 cards, I believe, left in Paulo Vitor Damo deck, 5 for Raphael Levy, and just 5 minutes left on the clock as well. This has been a gargantuan game 1 here. 2 giants of the game, both playing control, and I mean, there's been things going on for the entirety of this game, and I think that one of the challenges for maybe some of you guys watching at home is that on the face of things, there's been lots of positioning, but not a whole lot of killing anyone. And that's certainly unusual for a lot of Magic formats.
What is the target? I'm bouncing, spreading seas, and tapping his creatures.
So Paulo Vitor Damo there you hear him. He's bouncing, spreading seas.
Yeah.
He only needs that brief window of having white mana to potentially be able to get through in this game.
But wouldn't it be still better to have that white mana for multiple turns, especially if you want to maybe flashback Secure the Wastes with Snapcaster Mage?
So a small logic knot here coming. Small logic knot, all that's needed, because somehow or other Levy has found himself tapped out here. And Paulo Vitor Damo, he's found a way of untapping with white mana here. Just a couple of cards left in his deck after drawing for the turn. I believe that his pickup there was a largely redundant lightning bolt on the other side of the table.
Yeah, you can take out a 2/2 Knight if you want. Levy's at 6.
6, a very achievable amount of damage to deal here. Meanwhile, the amount of damage that Raphael Levy would have to do, 15, seems far less realistic than simply running his opponent out of cards at this point.
Especially with the Ancestral Visions. That's just the goal of Levy to stay alive until Ancestral Visions hits.
Now, looking at Raphael Levy's hand, he's just drawn Vendilion Click, which is potentially a way of him sniffing out what's going on here from Paulo Vitor Damo.
And that's huge, because if PV is forced to cast the Secure the Waste in response to Vendilion Click, then suddenly Supreme Verdict is live.
And of course, if Vendilion Click resolves, it does put the card that it takes on the bottom of your opponent's deck, or the player who owns its deck, and that means that that's the one place where it's just never going to have any impact in terms of winning this game.
But that's why PV is keeping fetch lands around. He will be able to at least increase his chances in drawing Secure the Waste, his trump card.
So is it better in response to this Vendilion Click to allow the Vendilion Click to put a Secure the Wastes on the bottom of his deck than it is to cast it in response and potentially have a mass removal spell deal with your warriors?
So I want to say it's better to cast it, because you force your opponent to have the mass removal spell, and you can recast the Secure the Wastes with Snapcaster Mage, but the PV has only white mana for only one turn, so he needs to find exactly the right moment in which to cast Secure the Wastes, and this might not be it. We might even see a counter battle over the Vendilion Click. I think PV should be relatively aware of the fact that Raph can't have many counters left in his hand, or simply because there aren't more in his deck. He has drawn so many cards, and PV will know how much mass removal is in a blue-white control deck. So he can do the math, and we all know how good PV is at this game and other games. This is something that is just very intuitive to him.
Well, just 1 minute left on the clock in this game 1 here. I guess it's borderline possible that we could see a 0-0 draw in this, but given how close these players are to running out of cards and all of those copies of Ancestral Vision sat on suspend for Raphael Levy, it strikes me as at least possible that we will have either a decking win or a beatdown win from Warriors before this game is out.
Yeah, and I think what we will see here is actually Van Click getting countered. Just too dangerous, too scary to deal with.
Now, in doing this little bit of counter magic here, is that going to leave Paulo a little bit short on mana to cast a big enough Secure the Wastes for it to be a concern?
Well, he doesn't have. Well, this is the point. He doesn't have to cast it this turn, but then he might be looking at the problem of not having white mana once again.
So many moving parts in this matchup. Really a test of both of these Hall of Famers.
But if he had bounced a Plains rather than bouncing Spreading Seas, I think he would be in a much better position.
So we are now on turn 0 of 5. Time has been called in this game 1 between Raphael, Levy and Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. Two heavyweights slugging it out, going all the way through the regular time, and now in extra time effectively just playing out a total of 5 turns after this one to figure out the conclusion of this match.
Yeah, what a way to start the Modern portion. I said it before, Control is viable in Modern.
Yeah. And clearly both of these players think so. Also Pierre Dargent, he was in our feature match area. He was playing blue-white control. We didn't get a chance to look in because we've had no live look-ins. We've been with this game from the get-go. Dargent picking up a win against Sean McLaren, who in the past, of course, has had great success with Jeskai Control himself. Not playing Jeskai Control in this tournament, but I'm sure there's the opportunity that we may see a little bit more of Sean at some point later in the competition.
Yeah, and PV is actually struggling to find a logic knot that's big enough to successfully counter Vandalion Click. So what might be happening here is that he plays it, makes the logic knot just large enough so that Levy will not be able to pay it and Supreme Verdict in the same turn. However, PV has also used quite a lot of his mana this turn.
That targets this, right? Now, what's going on? Sorry.
Yeah, I targeted this and then cast this for 9.
And you have no cards in your graveyard.
No cards in the graveyard.
0 cards in the graveyard. Raph is confirming.
So this is a logic knot for 9 here. You can see a huge amount of lands in play for Raphael Levy. So he's got some choices to make here. He's got 9 lands neatly together, but that does only leave 3 remaining lands. So you're absolutely on the money here, Simon. If he does choose to just simply pay for this logic knot, there will not be the opportunity to cast Supreme Verdict this turn.
And most likely he also doesn't have lands left in his deck, but he might have a Slash Calling, but I don't think he has fetchable lands left in his deck.
Yeah, this is one of the few circumstances where he would be happy to lower the amount of cards in his deck simply to be able to make sure that his key spell is able to resolve.
You can see in Levy's hand that he's holding Spreading Seas, a card he will not cast. If Secure the Wastes comes down, but he has 2 answers to the tokens, Supreme Verdict and Detention Sphere. Detention Sphere, critically, 1 mana cheaper than Supreme Verdict.
We've seen Detention Sphere doing all sorts of different work in this matchup. It's already dealt with Search for Azcanta, and if it works out as being the perfect answer here, then that could be enough to swing this game and indeed effectively this match for Raphael Levy, as we do see a Secure the Wastes coming down for Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa, creating 6 warriors, and Paulo basically just revealing that he has this lightning bolt.
Sorry, this is very cool.
Yeah, and this is tricky. He couldn't leave open a red to potentially counter a Detention Sphere trigger because he knew the Vandalion Click trigger was going to resolve.
Yeah, a really, really intense set of decisions in these latter stages of the game. And indeed, throughout this match, both of these players, Hall of Fame players, some of the best players in the world that you're ever likely to find. Between them, a colossal amount of experience at the Pro Tour level. And this has really taxed them at the very start of this constructed stage of Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan.
Absolutely. I thought on paper that Raph Levy would be the heavy favorite, but first of all, PV played this beautifully. Threatening to win with Burn, running Wrath out of counter magic, but then somehow still failing to to convert it into a victory. I think this was a really back and forth match. Definitely worth a rewatch just to understand some of the nuances that were going on.
So here come the Warriors. And detention sphere enough to deal with all of them. And now we're in a position where those copies of Ancestral Vision still on suspend seem to be the most obvious path to victory here for Raphael Levy.
PV still has a white source, so if he can find another Snapcaster Mage, there is a theoretical chance of casting Secure the Waste before you're getting decked by Ancestral Vision.
Go ahead.
I don't know if he can draw another one, though.
Lightning Helix the pickup there. So he has Lightning Bolt, which is something that Raphael Levy is doubly protected against thanks to those 2 Rune Halo. He does have a Lightning Helix. Raphael Levy on 6 life at present.
And Levy is not protected from Lightning Helix. That's what I found quite baffling when he didn't choose Lightning Helix with the second time the Rune Halo came down.
Definitely going to feel the sting if that decision comes back to haunt him here.
So what he needs to realize now is that he kind of needs the spreading seas on the white source just to be absolutely safe.
Now, of course, the reason that he's even concerned about casting it is both these players very, very low on cards in deck. If Raphael Levy casts Spreading Seas, that means that he is losing a card, and actually a Serum Vision's happening first here, essentially meaning that Raph Levy able to order all of the remaining cards in his deck. And I guess that at this point, this is him saying, I have to resolve this Ancestral Vision in order to be able to win the game.
Yeah, but this I don't understand. Why do you cast Serum Visions instead of Spreading Seas when we're considering that drawing a card is actually a cost? It's actually a high price to pay. Now if you're Spreading Seas, you're 1 card off death, so your Ancestral Visions have to resolve. If you just don't cast that Serum Visions, you can cast Spreading Seas and just go about your day being relatively sure that you'll win either with the first Ancestral Visions or the turn after with the next one.
So here comes the Spreading Seas. Targeting the 1 white producing land, and immediately Paulo quick to float white mana. Levy draws his card, and that is a Snapcaster Mage, so it's a pretty important one in the overall scheme of things. If we're saying that the important thing at this point is making sure that Ancestral Visions resolves, Snapcaster Mage, functionally another counterspell.
Yes, this was a huge draw, and actually Snapcaster Mage, the card that Paulo also wants or wanted to draw the most, probably still wants to draw the most because he doesn't know what Raph is holding, of course.
And I guess that at that point, Raph Levy knew the remaining cards in his deck, so the Serum Visions was basically him making sure that the 1 Snapcaster Mage left in his deck was going to end up in his hand by the end of that turn.
Yeah. There's actually another reason for the line that he chose, which I wasn't quite aware of. This is turn 2 of 5, so he knows he will only play 1 more turn. So in this case, the second Ancestor Vision is actually not relevant.
So attacks here, leaving Paulo Vitor Damo on 5. And here comes Ancestral Vision, targeting Paulo, and there's the handshake. What an epic game. You can hear rounds of applause because there's a big crowd around our feature match area checking out what's been going on in this round. Everyone in this modern Pro Tour, there's a lot of buzz about the room because there are so many different potential decks that people can play. Everyone wants to know what everyone else is up to, and when you hear about 2 heavyweights of the game playing a match like that one of the final matches to conclude in the room for this round 4, you've got to know where the right place to be is. You've got to head back and see a little bit of that match. And I'm very happy that we got a chance to see it from start to finish. Bizarrely, it's not very often that we have a literal 1-game feature match round, but if you had to pick a game, that was a fantastic one to pick.
Yeah, we do prefer to cover like 7 or 8 games, but no, this was very instructional.
And if you're looking to play Control, go back and watch that game a few times more. So many pivot points in there. But that is the end of our round 4. We'll be back with more magic for you soon enough in round 5 here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. But for now, sit back and enjoy these messages. That was a funny old match.
Scented candles, bubble bath, a cold diet beverage, and that last game of Magic. But hey, that's just me. What does Friday night have in store for you, I wonder? In any case, it's deck tech time, and we're going to give you the antidote to control to kick things off. So here comes Sam Eilenfeld with Burn.